And now on the line is Roderic O'Gorman, leader of the Green Party. Roderic, welcome back to the FM.
Hi Darren, thanks very much for having me on.
Okay, Roderic, I was talking to you at one point during the recent general election campaign when you called at my parents' house while you were canvassing. Our last interview though on Near FM was actually 5 years ago during the 2020 general election campaign. In that election 2020, you got elected as a TD for the first time and your party in general did very well, and then you went into government. And most recently we had the 2024 general election where you got re-elected but your party in general did not do well. This might be a big question, Roderic, but can you summarise to me please how you would view the last 5 years for your party, both in terms of you getting elected, re-elected, and going into government, and just up until the present day?
Well, you're right. That is a big question, Darren, and it's not one I can give a short answer to. But I suppose we were in government for 4.5 years. When we ran in 2020, when I first got elected, we were highlighting the challenges that climate change were presenting to Ireland, were presenting to the world. And we highlighted that you needed a party to go into government, to take the decisions, to make the investments, to make the changes to address that. And that's what we did. We did exactly as we said we would do when we spoke to people, when we asked for people for their votes in that election early in 2020. And we've been able to do a lot. Our climate emissions in Ireland are falling. They fell by 6.8% in 2023. They're at their lowest rate now in 30 years. That's a huge achievement. And we did that at the same time that our economy is growing. So we've been able to kind of break that link between rising emissions and rising economic growth as well. Our economic growth is going up. Our emissions are going down. That's because of the policies and the investments that the Green Party put in, making public transport cheaper, making public transport more efficient. We've rolled out new bus routes, particularly in rural Ireland, recognising there weren't enough choices in terms of public transport for a lot of people living outside of our towns and cities. We've supported schools to put solar panels on their roofs. We've supported households to retrofit and make their homes warmer and cheaper to heat. And we've put in place binding targets that all parts of society have to reach in order to reduce their carbon emissions. And that's just in the area of climate. I was able to do a lot in terms of reducing childcare costs for parents. My colleague Catherine Martin was able to do a lot in terms of supporting artists, for example, through the Artist Basic Income Scheme. So we were able to save families, save parents money, and at the same time invest in important steps to reduce our carbon emissions. And those were very much what we were focused on.
Yeah, Catherine Martin, I know, did a couple of big things for the Irish language. She gave funding so Cúil will be established, didn't she?
Exactly, and that funding for arts and culture is something that we as a Green Party see as really important. And it was a sector that had been neglected, I think, for a number of years. And I think we've been able to take significant steps to reverse that and actually recognise that artists are such an important driver of talent and innovation in our economy, but they need support in order to be able to do that.
Okay, next question. I think you might have already answered the first part of this question, but this might be a big question as well. But I was going to ask you, could you give me a summary of what you think your party got right over the last few years in government? And you think you've already answered that. But do you think that you got anything wrong in government, you and your party?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges for us is that early in the term of government, some of our political opponents created this argument that green measures cost people money and that we were only about, putting hardship on people. And I think we probably didn't fight back against that argument because I don't accept it. I don't believe it's true. But we didn't fight back against that argument strongly enough and early enough. And then, obviously, after COVID, and particularly after the war in Ukraine, we saw a big spike in the cost of living. And everyone was feeling that pressure. Everyone was kind of minding the euros and the cents. And again, this political argument that was out there, the Greens are only about putting more expense on you. That was particularly damaging at a time when everybody was struggling to make ends meet. So even though things Eamon Ryan did, like cut the cost of public transport for everybody, and particularly half the cost of public transport for students and young adults, like that made a big difference to people. I was able to half childcare costs for most parents. That was a huge positive step for families all over the country. So despite the fact that many of our policies were actually saving people money, that kind of narrative was out there in the public, and particularly on social media. And I think that was really damaging to us. It certainly came up a lot for me during the general election. And, you know, when you're on a door, you have the opportunity to kind of explain to someone, well, this is what we actually did. This is how we actually worked to save people money. But, you know, you can only meet so many people in an election campaign. So I don't think we were strong enough or quick enough in fighting back against that narrative.
Okay, and why do you think it is like it became almost popular to some in rural Ireland people against your environmental policies? Why do you think that was?
Well, I think it ties into we were, you know, targeted by our political opponents, and indeed sometimes by, you know, people, backbenchers within the coalition as well, in terms of maybe difficult decisions that had to be made that all three parties had signed up to, but were very much kind of the blame for unpopular measures was often placed on ourselves. But look, we're very conscious that, you know, the vote was particularly low in large parts of rural Ireland, and I think that is something that we as a party have to reflect on. You know, we believe our policies will benefit all Ireland's people living in cities, people living in towns and villages, and people living in rural Ireland. But that obviously wasn't the perception out there. And, you know, as we look to rebuild, as we look to take back council seats in areas where we lost them last June, particularly in rural Ireland, I think we have to reflect in terms of how our message better reaches people in rural Ireland and is seen as relevant to them.
Okay, just one more policy issue there. I know this is not a Green Party. The Green Party didn't start this policy. I believe some people blamed it for you. It's a tax on petrol and oil or whatever for driving a car. I don't personally drive a car, so it doesn't really affect me. But I think if I did drive, I would be outraged that something like 50% or more of the cost to buy petrol for a car goes to the government. Like, I know the policy didn't start with the Green Party, but can you explain to our listeners the kind of rationale behind the price being so high?
Well, the vast majority of tax on petrol or diesel is excise duty, and that's been in place pretty much, I'd say, since the Irish state were founded. So, you know, Green Party might be old, but we're not that old. So that's been in there. And that's raised by government pretty much every budget. It's one of the that and tax on cigarettes and alcohol. Those duties are one of the staple taxes. And that is a very large proportion. It is a large proportion of what people pay at the petrol pump. There's also the carbon tax, which is a much smaller piece. I think it's only about maybe 9 or 10 cents in the litre, compared with a much higher rate on excise duty. And look, particularly on excise duty, I suppose ultimately, you know, this government cut taxes in terms of it cut people's, it cut personal rates of taxation in every government, in every budget. But the state also has to, you know, bring in money in terms of supporting the range of investments that, you know, people want to see in housing, disability services, in our health services as well. And you know, tax receipts like stamp, like excise do, you know, they meet a very important part of paying for those services.
Okay, we'll move on. Only in the last week or so, Roderic, you got a senator elected in the Oireachtas, didn't you?
Yeah, Malcolm Noonan was elected in the Seanad last week, and he actually the Seanad sat for the first time today, so he would have taken his seat as a member of Seanad Éireann today. So we're absolutely delighted. the parliamentary party of two now. Malcolm, as you know, was Minister for Nature over the last 4.5 years, and he would have been really focused on that idea of ensuring that there's space for nature and that species like the corncrake, the curlew, the hen harrier, like Irish species that are actually in danger of becoming, extinct, are protected. And we put in place schemes to pay farmers, pay landowners, so they can actually make a living while, respecting habitat and ensuring that these species can continue to live and thrive.
Yeah, I imagine that having Malcolm elected as a senator is a great relief for your party and for you personally. Okay, Roderic, can you give our listeners today an idea of what to expect from the Green Party in the lifetime of the current government? And can you tell me, do you have much confidence that your party will be able to rebuild in time for the next election?
Well, we've TD and myself, the senator now, and Malcolm. We've 23 councillors all over in towns and cities all over Dublin. We've 10. We've 8 councillors, as you know, in Dublin City Council, and we've 5 councillors in Northern Ireland because we are an All Ireland party. So we are working now. I'll be appointing new spokespeople to mirror the various government departments in the next number of weeks. And over the summer, we'll be working on a strategic plan, setting out how we are going to continue to advocate strongly on those key Green Party issues, a focus on climate, a focus on supporting families and kids, focus on making sure our public transport networks are better all over the country and are meeting the needs of consumers. So, I'm a member of the opposition now, and I'll be using the platform I have to hold government to account when it's not meeting the commitments that's set out in the new programme for government. I think the new programme for government is quite disappointing, not very ambitious. It doesn't set out many clear targets that the new government is hoping to reach. So I'm looking forward to holding them to account over the next 4 or 5 years.
Okay, Roderic, we are recording this interview today on Wednesday the 12th, and we'll be going out on Tony's programme on Near FM on Sunday. For the day that's in it, there was a demo outside the Dolls today by students from 5 Gaelscoill in Dublin, calling for more clarity from the Department of Education about the new Gael cluster plan for the Dublin 2, 4, 6 and 8 region. Can you tell me, Roderic, do you and your party support this campaign, and do you believe that catering for the demand for new Gaelscoill and new Gael cluster across the country is a good thing that should be facilitated by government and the Department of Education?
Yeah, the Green Party absolutely support the choice of parents and children who want to undertake their primary and secondary education through Irish language. As you know, in the Dublin 15 area where we live, Darren, there's a number of Gaelscoill, and we also have an Eadrad at Colossian, a token attached to one of our English language secondary schools, Luttrellstown Community College, and the hope is that that as that grows and more, it gets bigger numbers, it could ultimately become a standalone Gael Colosta. So I think we have to support that. I think in all parts of the country where parents want that choice of an Irish language medium, it is essential as the official national language that we support parents and children in being able to vindicate that particular choice.